A comfortable humidity level for most people is between 30 and 60%. What is a hygrometer?
A hygrometer is an instrument that measures the humidity. Italian artist and inventor Leonardo da Vinci, 1452 to 1519, is often credited with constructing the first hygrometer. His design was later improved upon by Francesco Fali, 1624 to 1685, in 1664, and Swiss physicist and geologist Horace Benedict de Saussure, 1740 to 1799, designed the first mechanical hygrometers. There are basically two types of hygrometers. 1. Dry and wet bulb psychrometers, and 2. Mechanical hygrometers. The first type uses dry and wet bulb thermometers to compare temperature changes resulting from humidity. The second type uses either organic material, blonde human hairs, which expand or contract based on humidity levels, or semiconductors made of lithium chloride, or other substances whose degrees of electrical resistance change according to humidity.
Is it true that no two snowflakes are exactly the same shape?
Some snowflakes may have strikingly similar shapes, but these twins are probably not molecularly identical. In 1986, cloud physicist Nancy Knight believed she found a uniquely cloned pair of crystals on an oil-coated slide that had been hanging from an airplane. This pair may have been the result of breaking off from a star crystal, or were attached side by side, thereby experiencing the same weather conditions simultaneously. Unfortunately, the smaller aspects of each of the snow crystals could not be studied because the photograph was unable to capture possible molecular differences. So, even if the human eye may see twin flakes, on a minuscule level these flakes are different.
What is an ice age?
Geologists define an ice age as a period when more of the Earth's surface was covered by larger ice sheets than in modern times, or when cool temperatures endured for extended periods of time, allowing the polar ice to advance into lower, more temperate latitudes. The last ice age event, which ended about 12,000 years ago, is referred to as the Ice Age or the Great Ice Age, both usually capitalized a time when ice covered nearly 32% of the land and 30% of the oceans.
What is a hectopascal?
A hectopascal, HPA, is the same thing as a millibar. Some meteorologists, especially outside the United States, use hectopascals instead of millibars or inches of mercury because the HPA is the International System of Units, SI, standard.
How big can a raindrop get?
The laws of physics restrain raindrops from getting too large before they break up into smaller droplets. Thus, about 0.25 inches, 0.635 centimeters, is the largest a drop can get and still have the surface tension of the water hold it together.
Who was Cleveland Abbé?
Also famous as the person who proposed the creation of time zones, Cleveland Abbé. 1838 to 1916, was an American meteorologist and founder of the Weather Bulletin. EST 1869, the first daily periodical to include weather forecasts. He also established the National Weather Bureau in 1870, which is now the National Weather Service.
Has there ever been an F6 tornado?
No. Although the old Fujita scale did allow for an F6 tornado, estimating that winds up to 380 miles. 611 kilometers per hour were theoretically possible, there has been no recorded tornado of that intensity. The EFS does not include an F6 category at all, and lists any tornado with winds over 200 miles, 320 kilometers per hour as an F5.
Can the form of snowflake crystals be predicted?
Snowflake crystals come in several forms, including needle-shaped, plate-like, capped columns, and feathery dendrites. Temperature and humidity levels determine which type of shape is formed, so, yes. If these conditions are known, the type of snowflake formed could be predicted. In natural conditions, this would of course be impractical. But laboratory conditions could be established to form particular types of snow crystals, if desired.
How often do ocean tides occur on Earth?
During a 26-hour period, each point on Earth's surface moves through a series of 2 high tides and 2 low tides, first high, then low, then high again, then low again. The length of the cycle is the sum of Earth's period of rotation, or the length of its day. 24 hours, and the Moon's eastward orbital movement around Earth, 2 hours.
What important power source doesn't cause global warming?
Although many people worry about what to do with the resulting waste products, nuclear energy has the advantage of not generating global warming emissions. This fact has helped give a tremendous boost to U.S. nuclear reactors. But while the reactors themselves do not create emissions, such plants still leave a carbon footprint. This is because the uranium used to power them needs to be mined. The ore has to be shipped and processed, and plants have to be built and maintained. All of these things result in energy being used from sources such as gasoline and coal. As of 2008, there are 104 nuclear power plants in the United States, providing a little over 20% of the nation's electricity needs.
What part of a hurricane is most damaging?
Floods caused by hurricane storm surges are the most destructive element. The low-pressure center of a hurricane causes a mound of water to rise above the surrounding water. This hill of water is pushed by the hurricane's fierce winds and low pressure onto the land, where it floods coastal communities, causing significant damage. Hurricanes sometimes spark tornadoes that contribute to the devastation.
What are noctilucent clouds?
Forming at altitudes of 47 to 56 miles, 75 to 90 kilometers. These are the highest clouds you'll see in our atmosphere. Blown about by upper atmosphere winds averaging 100 miles, 161 kilometers, an hour. These cirrus-like clouds only form during the summer, and only at latitudes of 50 to 75 degrees north and 40 to 60 degrees south. They are usually seen at twilight and have a bluish or silvery color, sometimes flecked with red. It is speculated that noctilucent clouds may form as a result of meteor dust in the upper atmosphere because these clouds are more common when meteor activity increases.
Do we have any evidence of global warming in the past?
Yes, there is a great deal of evidence for global warming events in the past. The following lists two of the more well-known ones: mid-Cretaceous period. During this period, between about 120 and 90 million years ago, new ocean crust was produced at about twice the normal rate. Large volcanic plateaus were forming in the ocean basins, ocean temperatures were very high, and there was a peak in worldwide petroleum formation. Just as startling was the sea level, which was about 330 to 660 feet. 100 to 200 meters, higher than at present. The reasons for the high temperatures were probably numerous, including the release of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, by volcanic eruptions, creating a supergreenhouse effect. This led to temperatures about 20 to 22 degrees Fahrenheit, 10 to 12 degrees Celsius, above our current average global temperatures. Interestingly enough, it is thought that the large volume of basalts that erupted on the ocean floor displaced a great deal of ocean water, causing sea levels to rise. And with the rise in sea level and temperatures, organisms flourished, eventually providing material necessary for petroleum formation. Eocene period. During this time, between about 55 to 38 million years ago, temperatures also increased, with tropical vegetation reaching about 45 to 55 degrees north and south of the equator, or about 15 degrees higher than today. Based on rock samples, it appears that the Earth had between 2 and 6 times the amount of carbon dioxide we have today. Scientists believe this global warming was caused by continental collisions, events that released large amounts of this greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. This also shows how the rock cycle and tectonic processes can affect atmospheric conditions.
What are microclimates?
Microclimates are small-scale regions where the average weather conditions are measurably different from the larger, surrounding region. Differences in temperature, precipitation, wind, or cloud cover can produce microclimates. Frequent causes of microclimates are differences in elevation, mountains that alter wind patterns, shorelines, and man-made structures that can alter wind patterns.
What are some of the highest temperatures recorded?
El Azizia, Libya 1922 136/57.5 Death Valley CA 1913 134/56.
How do I find financial aid to study meteorology?
Other than contacting your university's meteorology department and its financial aid office. A good place to look for scholarships, fellowships, and internships is the American Meteorological Society. The National Council of Industrial Meteorologists also provides stipends to undergraduates. Finally, the U.S. Navy and Air Force both offer programs in meteorology for those who attend. The Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC, in college, and then go to officer training school. Your education is then paid for by the military.
Does the Earth's tilt ever change?
Yes. Our planet actually wobbles a bit, like a spinning top running out of steam. Currently, the axial tilt of our planet is about 23.5 degrees, which is somewhere in the middle of its total capable range of 22.1 to 24.5 degrees. The change in tilt occurs over a period of about 41,000 years.
How much does it rain in the Amazonian rainforest?
The largest rainforest in the world surrounds the Amazon River basin, most of which lies within the borders of Brazil. Here, the average rainfall is 80 inches, 200 centimeters, annually. Interestingly, despite all the rain and thick forest growth, the soil in the Amazon region is quite sterile and not well suited to farming.
Does irrigation of farmland affect the climate?
Extensive land irrigation can, indeed, affect the weather. As of 2000, the total amount of land on Earth that has been irrigated is about 689 million acres. About 60% of the world's fresh water supplies are used toward this purpose, representing 137 billion gallons, 518.5 billion liters, of water daily. As one might imagine, when all of this water is spread over cropland, a certain amount of it will evaporate into the atmosphere. Hydrologists believe that this amount of evaporation is enough to increase the number of rainstorms that would otherwise occur.
Who first theorized that human activities were causing climate change?
The Swedish scientists Svante August Arrhenius, 1859–1927, who was one of the founders of the discipline of physical chemistry, is sometimes credited as the first person to discuss in detail the effects of carbon dioxide, CO2, on Earth's climate. Arrhenius came upon his theory while studying past ice ages, and in 1896 published a paper in which he proposed that ice ages occur when CO2 levels go down. By his estimates, doubling CO2 amounts would increase average world temperatures by about 2.5 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius, and having the levels of this gas would have the opposite effect. Recent modeling studies come quite close to Arrhenius's original estimate. Unlike today's environmentalists and climatologists, however, the Swedish scientist believed that global warming would be a good thing for two reasons. It would help prevent another ice age and it would aid in crop production to feed a hungry world.
Who first hypothesized that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere had something to do with climate change?
Swedish chemist Svante Arrhenius, 1859–1927, was the first to propose that the atmosphere would hold more heat as concentrations of carbon dioxide increased.
Who invented the modern thermometer?
Ferdinand II de' Medici, 1610 to 1670, Grand Duke of Tuscany. Was also an accomplished physicist. He is generally credited with inventing the first modern thermometer in 1641. It consisted of a sealed tube containing alcohol. This type of thermometer was called a spirit thermometer. Possibly because alcoholic drinks are sometimes referred to as spirits. Today, alcohol thermometers are still referred to by this quaint label. Ferdinand II improved on his design in 1654, 10 years later, Robert Hooke, 1635 to 1703, adapted the Duke's thermometer, standardizing the measurements in a more logical way. The Duke had arbitrarily divided his thermometer into 50 degrees, using the freezing and boiling points of water as standards.
Why is Earth's magnetic field important to life on Earth?
Earth's magnetic field extends out into space, creating a structure called a magnetosphere, which surrounds our planet. When the magnetosphere is hit by charged particles from space, such as from the solar wind or from a coronal mass ejection, it deflects these particles away from Earth's surface, significantly reducing the amount that strikes life forms down on Earth's surface. This protects us from the hazards of being hit by too many such particles.
Why don't lakes and ponds freeze solid in the winter?
When ice forms in lakes, ponds, and other bodies of water, it floats to the surface because liquid water is denser than solid ice. As water cools below 38 degrees Fahrenheit 3.3 degrees Celsius, it becomes less and less dense, and thus more buoyant. This is good news for fish and other plants and animals that live in small bodies of water, since they can live below the layer of ice that forms.
What does it mean when we say something is on the lee side of the wind?
If a person is standing on the lee side of something, say, a building or rocky prominence, then he or she is protected from the wind because that obstacle is between him or her and the oncoming wind.
What causes ice ages?
No one knows why ice ages occur, but there are several theories. One possibility is that the sun's energy varies in intensity over time. Each time there is a decrease in activity, an ice age may occur as the Earth cools. Another possibility is an increase in dust in the atmosphere, either from volcanoes or a large meteorite impact. The debris from either event would reflect more of the sun's light into space. Albedo, cooling down the atmosphere and causing more snow and ice to form. This would also further increase the world's albedo, as even more sunlight would reflect off the ice and snow. However, this theory has a problem, as many of the other theories do, in that it doesn't explain what causes the ice sheets to retreat.
Is carbon dioxide pollution a problem?
While carbon dioxide occurs naturally in the environment, and, indeed, is essential to plant life, too much of even a good thing can be bad. Increased carbon dioxide levels, of course, are now infamous for leading to global warming. See the chapter on climate change for more on this. But near ground level this gas can also be poisonous to plants and animals. This became readily apparent during a 1990 incident in which carbon dioxide emissions from volcanic faults in California's Inyo National Forest killed trees and caused tourists to become dizzy and lightheaded. The tourists became ill while inside cabins, where the levels of carbon dioxide had increased to 25% of the air content.
What is the difference between a lunar eclipse and a solar eclipse?
A solar eclipse occurs when the moon passes between the Earth and the Sun, while a lunar eclipse happens when the Earth is between the moon and the Sun. In a solar eclipse, the moon casts a shadow on the Earth's surface, while the opposite is true of a lunar eclipse.
What is precession?
Precession is a phenomenon that results from the planet's changing tilt. You can think of it as a kind of wobbling effect. About 12,900 years from now, the North Pole will be tilted toward the Sun in January and away from it in June. This means that the winter season in the North will occur during the months that are now considered summer. Late June through early September, and summer will occur from January through March. This change will be gradual over time, and no one alive today or for many generations will be aware of it.
What are VOCs?
VOC stands for volatile organic compound. They are organic chemicals that easily vaporize in the atmosphere.
Occurring during the summer, how warm can it get in Antarctica?
Antarctica is not always an icebox perpetually below freezing. During the summer months, it can often get into the 40s and 50s Fahrenheit, 4 to 14 degrees Celsius. The warmest temperature on record thus far on the continent is 59 degrees Fahrenheit. 15 degrees Celsius, at Vanda Station on January 5, 1974.
Who discovered the ozone layer?
In 1913, French physicists Henri Buisson, 1873–1944, and Charles Fabry, 1867–1945, full name. Marie-Paul Auguste Charles Fabry, theorized that an ozone layer existed in the upper atmosphere. It was confirmed in a series of measurements of ultraviolet radiation. Levels that were recorded by W. N. Hartley and A. Cornu from 1879 to 1881.
What happens to domesticated animals during blizzards?
Farm and range animals certainly suffer as much as people during blizzards. For example, in the blizzard of 1886 that hit the Central Plains states of America, about 80% of livestock perished in the worst affected areas of Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, and Kansas. In 1966, 100,000 head of livestock died in Nebraska, Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota when a blizzard dumped 30 feet, 9 meters, of snow, drifts of up to 30 feet. Over 9 meters, accumulated, and winds gusted up to 100 miles, 160 kilometers, per hour.
What is a Rossby wave?
Named after Swedish meteorologist Carl Gustav Rossby, 1898–1957. Rossby waves refer to the large air mass waves that inhabit the middle layer of our atmosphere, including the jet stream and high and low pressure systems.
When does frost form?
A frost is a crystalline deposit of small thin ice crystals formed on objects that are at freezing or below freezing temperatures. This phenomenon occurs when atmospheric water vapor condenses directly into ice without first becoming a liquid. This process is called sublimation. Usually frost appears on clear, calm nights, especially during early autumn when the air above the earth is quite moist. Permafrost is ground permanently frozen that never thaws out completely.
Is it true that being hit by lightning can have health benefits?
There have been some documented cases where people who were legally blind were hit by lightning and, indeed, found out afterwards that they had regained their vision. There are also a few cases where victims of lightning bolts found out that they did better on intelligence tests afterwards. Indeed, some have even claimed that they have gained psychic abilities.
Is it possible to get frostbite in Hawaii?
Sure. Stand on top of Mount Haleakala on the island of Maui, or Mauna Kea on the Big Island. In the winter, or even spring or summer, and you can easily be exposed to temperatures well below -20 degrees Fahrenheit. -29 degrees Celsius, for a long enough time to develop frostbite.
What is a front?
A front is any boundary existing between differing masses of air. That is, masses that have different overall temperatures and humidity. Fronts come in 4 types: warm, cold, stationary, and occluded. A warm front is a front that is advancing over a cooler mass of air, while a cold front is just the opposite. Stationary fronts, as one might guess, represent boundaries between warm and cold air that are in relative equilibrium, although they can still move back and forth by as much as several hundred miles and yet be considered stationary. An occluded front occurs whenever a cold front, instead of merely overtaking warm air, actually separates and breaks apart warm mass of air. Occluded fronts come in both warm and cold varieties. In a warm occluded front, the cold air at the advancing side of the warm front is cooler than the air in the cold front that is overtaking it. In a cold occluded front, the cold air at the advancing side of the warm front is warmer than the air in the advancing cold front.
Is a halo around the sun or moon a sign of rain or snow approaching?
The presence of a ring around the sun or, more commonly, the moon in the night sky betrays very high ice crystals composing cirrostratus clouds. The brighter the ring, the greater the odds of precipitation and the sooner it may be expected. Rain or snow will not always fall, but 2 times out of 3. Precipitation will start to fall within 12 to 18 hours. These cirriform clouds are a forerunner of an approaching warm front and an associated low-pressure system.
Are all asteroids located in the asteroid belt?
No. There are many asteroids in other regions of the solar system. Chiron, for example, which was discovered in 1977, orbits between Saturn and Uranus. Another example is the Trojan asteroids that follow the orbit of Jupiter near Lagrange points, one group preceding the planet, the other following it, and can thus orbit safely without crashing into Jupiter itself.
What is Arctic sea smoke?
when extremely cold air blows over Arctic ice packs. The warmer seawater beneath causes fog to form when it comes into contact with the colder air. As the fog rises, it may appear to be smoke plumes.
What is UVA and UVB radiation?
VA and UVB are two categories within the ultraviolet range. UVA radiation has a wavelength between 320 and 400 nanometers. And UVB has a range of 290 to 320 nanometers. The more energetic UVB radiation is considered more dangerous to people, as it can lead to malignant melanomas. UVA can also potentially cause cancer, but is more likely to just cause unsightly wrinkles and leathery skin. This is why dermatologists and other physicians always recommend using sunscreen to prevent damage from ultraviolet radiation.
What are nacreous clouds?
Nacreous clouds are clouds that occur at elevations of 12 to 20 miles, 19 to 32 kilometers high, rarely at lower altitudes, and look like cirrus or altocumulus lenticularis clouds. Often quite beautiful, they are sometimes called mother-of-pearl clouds because of irisation. Supercooled water droplets causing refraction of sunlight that gives the edges of these clouds multiple colors in a kind of mother-of-pearl effect. Seen in northern climes, such as Alaska, Scotland, and Scandinavia. These clouds form only a couple hours before sunrise or after sunset.
What is the Maunder minimum?
Named after English astronomer Edward W. Maunder, 1851 to 1928, the Maunder minimum was a period of extremely low sunspot activity that lasted from 1645 to 1715. Maunder discovered this solar event by researching old records.
What is fire weather forecasting?
Fire weather forecasters concern themselves with studying rainfall, humidity, temperature, thunderstorms, wind and sunlight conditions that could leave areas such as forests and grasslands vulnerable to wildfires. These forecasts can prepare fire crews and other emergency support before a fire begins. And after fires begin, they can help professionals determine such things as the possible direction a fire will spread and whether or not an oncoming rainstorm might help put the fire out.
What is a harmattan?
This word refers to the sub-Saharan, west coast winds that are dry, hot, and dusty, but fairly moderate in strength.
What is continentality?
Areas of a continent that are distant from an ocean, such as the central United States, experience greater extremes in temperature than do places that are closer to an ocean. These inland areas experience continentality. It might be very hot during the summer, but it can also get very cold in winter. Areas close to oceans experience moderating effects from the ocean that reduce the range in temperatures.
How was the Fahrenheit scale developed?
The temperature scale still in use in the United States, while the rest of the world uses the metric system of Celsius. Is named after German engineer and physicist Gabriel Fahrenheit, 1686 to 1736. Fahrenheit developed his scale after visiting Danish astronomer Ole Christensen Romer. 1644 to 1710, in 1708. For his experiments, Romer was using an alcohol thermometer upon which he had marked a scale from 0 degrees, the lowest temperature he could achieve in his laboratory using a mixture of ice, water, and salt, to 60 degrees, the boiling point of water. This system actually mimics the basic idea behind the Celsius scale. While Fahrenheit left no records as to why he chose certain high and low points on his thermometers, there has been speculation on this matter. It is known that he used his own body temperature as the high point on his thermometer. But he marked this temperature as 96 degrees. Some believe he chose this number because it was easily divisible by 2s and 3s. For his 0-degree mark he used Romer's figure. Fahrenheit later determined that water normally froze at 32 degrees on his scale and boiled at 212 degrees.
What is the air pressure on top of Mt. Everest?
Mountain climbers ascending the peak of Mt. Everest, 29,029 feet, 8,848 meters. Will find the air pressure to be about a third of what they are used to. That's important not so much because of the pressure itself, but because it means there is also 2/3 less oxygen to breathe. When climbers reach 26,246 feet, 8,000 meters, they are at the point above which is the death zone. Many people carry oxygen tanks with them when they reach this height. Although some consider it a particular test of their mettle to go without. High altitude sickness hypoxia causes fatigue, distorted vision, confusion, and loss of memory and appetite. Cerebral and pulmonary edema will set in if a person goes too long before returning to normal air pressure. And this can prove fatal within a couple of days. Frigid temperatures and lack of oxygen have killed dozens of people who have attempted to reach the top of the world. Overall, more than 150 climbers have died on the world's tallest mountain.
Is the relative humidity always 100% during times when it is raining or snowing?
While the formation of rain and snow within a cloud requires humidity to reach a saturation point, by the time the precipitation reaches lower elevations and the ground, the rain, hail, or snow can exist within air that has a lower humidity.
What is the Coriolis effect?
Named after French mathematician scientist Gustave Coriolis, 1792 to 1843. Who first explained it in 1835, the Coriolis effect refers to the way objects appear to move in a curving or circular pattern when observed from a point of view position that is rotating. Imagine yourself standing next to a playground carousel. Two of your friends are riding on opposite sides of the carousel as it spins around. One friend holds a ball and tries to roll it to the person on the other side. But as he does so, the ball seems to veer to one side and roll off the carousel. To your point of view, as you stand off to the side, however, the ball rolled in a straight line. But it did not reach your other friend because as the ball moved across the carousel moved beneath it and the intended receiver was no longer in the original position. Now imagine the Earth as it spins on its axis. Above the Earth, suspended in the atmosphere, is a forming hurricane. The air around the hurricane is moving toward the eye, which is where the lowest air pressure is. However, as the air moves toward the eye, it is deflected to the right. In the northern hemisphere, by the Earth's spin, or to the left, in the southern hemisphere. This causes the hurricane clouds to rotate counterclockwise in the north and clockwise in the south.
What are ocean currents?
The oceans don't remain still, their water is constantly moving in giant circles known as currents. In the northern hemisphere, surface currents move clockwise, while in the southern hemisphere they move counterclockwise. Currents help to moderate temperatures on land in places like the British Isles, which are farther north than the U.S. Canadian border, by sending warm water from the Caribbean northeast across the Atlantic Ocean to northern Europe. A current known as the Antarctic Circumpolar Current circles the southern continent. The North Atlantic and North Pacific Oceans each have a large clockwise current, while the South Atlantic and South Pacific Oceans each have a large counterclockwise current.
How did the Kalpana 1 get its name?
India's Kalpana 1 satellite was originally called the METSAT, meteorological satellite. However, it was renamed in honor of Kalpana Chawla, the Indian astronaut who died in the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster on February 1, 2003.
How is asthma related to air pollution levels?
Asthma is rapidly becoming one of the major health issues in the United States, especially for children living in cities. A study released by the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases in 2008 showed that asthma particularly affected children in poor, inner-city areas and that car emissions of nitrogen dioxide, as well as air particulates and sulfur dioxide, were to blame. The study evaluated over 800 children in 7 urban areas. These children had significantly higher rates of asthma and decreased lung function, which contributed to poor health and school absenteeism, even when the level of pollutants in the areas where they lived was deemed to be lower than acceptable standards set by the Environmental Protection Agency. Other studies have also shown that children have more allergies when they have been exposed to higher levels of air pollution.
What are the consequences in the United States when there is an unusually cool summer?
Cooler than normal summers can have both benefits and drawbacks. Drawbacks include poorer crop harvests and, in states where summer tourism is important, reduced income for businesses and fewer tax dollars for local government. People tend to run their air conditioners less, as well, which is good for the environment but hard on utility companies trying to maintain a profit. Meanwhile, consumers save on utility expenses. As one might guess, incidents of heat stroke and dehydration are reduced and hospitals see fewer patients stricken by these problems.
What is a crepuscular ray?
A less technical name for a crepuscular ray would be a sunbeam, such as can be seen when streams of sunlight emerge from behind a cloud during the twilight hours. Crepuscule means twilight. In the Bible, they may have inspired the story of Jacob's ladder. Genesis 28:11-19, and so they are often named after that story. Another descriptive phrase for crepuscular rays is the sun drawing water, because people once believed that the beams of light were actually formed by water being sucked up into the sun. Because these rays are seen as clouds are breaking up, folklore rightfully interprets them as a sign that good weather will likely be ahead.
Do other scientists believe we may be heading for an ice age?
Yes. In 2006, for example, chief researcher Kababulo Abdusamatov at the Russian Academy of Sciences said that he believed worldwide average temperatures would slowly decrease from 2012 to 2015. And then in the middle of this century there would be a much more precipitous drop in temperatures that would last for 60 years.
What is Doppler radar?
Doppler radar measures frequency differences between signals bouncing off objects moving away from or toward it. By measuring the difference between the transmitted and received frequencies, Doppler radar calculates the speed of the air in which the rain, snow, ice crystals, and even insects are moving. It can then be used to predict speed and direction of wind and amount of precipitation associated with a storm.
What are the hail belts?
Hail belts are regions that are ideal for hailstorm formation. They can be found downwind of mountain ranges, usually in mid-latitude areas.
At what point does the sky turn from blue to black?
The blueness of the sky fades away as you get higher in the atmosphere. By the time you are in the lower troposphere, such as when flying in the upper elevations in a commercial jet plane around 35,000 feet, about 10,600 meters, the air is quite thin and begins to look dark. Above 150,000 feet, about 45,750 meters, the sky turns increasingly black as you enter the stratosphere.
What type of pyranometer does the National Weather Service use?
Instead of the Campbell-Stokes recorder, the NWS uses a device called the Marvin Sunshine Recorder. A more elaborate device, it consists of one clear and one blackened bulb connected by a thin glass tube partly filled with mercury. As sunlight warms the blackened bulb more than the clear one, the mercury expands and shorts out an electrical contract that then operates a pen that marks a chronograph.
What is Graupel?
Graupel, also known as snow pellets, is a funny word that means soft hail. It is created when supercooled water causes rime to form around a snowflake nucleus. Graupel is heavier and more granular than regular snow. Because of this, large amounts of graupel forming on a hill or mountainside can create dangerous conditions suitable for avalanches.
What is the most rainfall ever recorded within a one-day period?
Tropical storm Claudette brought a record U.S. rainfall of 43 inches in 24 hours in and around Alvin, Texas, in July of 1979.
What is the Bergeron-Feindiesen mechanism?
Swedish meteorologist Tor Harald Percival Bergeron, 1891–1977, formed the theory that is accepted today about how clouds formed, including the role that ice crystals, water vapor, and temperature play. His theories were later confirmed by German meteorologist Walter Feindiesen, 1909–1945. The process of cloud formation is therefore known as the Bergeron-Feindiesen mechanism.
Among the hail belt, what are some notable record hail accumulations?
In 1968, a storm in Illinois dumped the equivalent of 82 million cubic feet. 2.32 million cubic meters, of ice over a 620,000-acre area. Then, in 1980, a hailstorm in Orient, Iowa, left hail drifts that were 6 feet, 1.8 meters, deep.
How many F5 tornadoes have there been in the United States since 1970?
There have been 28 F5 tornadoes in the United States since 1970. 6 of these occurred during the tornado outbreak of April 1974.
What is latent heat?
The concept of latent heat was discovered by Scottish chemist Joseph Black, 1728–1799, as well as independently, by Swiss meteorologist, geologist, and physicist Jean-André Deluc, 1727–1817. When water condenses, cools, or freezes, it loses energy and, thus, gives off heat. Water condensing into vapor releases an amount of energy equal to 600 calories per gram of water. When water freezes, it releases about 80 calories per gram. The heat released provides energy for storms to form.
What is pose?
POSE is an acronym for Polar Operational Environmental Satellite. These are the successors to the TIROS satellites, and they are thus called the Advanced Television Infrared Observation Satellites, ATN or TIROS-N. Like the GOES, there are 2 POSE operated by the U.S. Department of Defense's Air Force Space and Missile Systems Center in what is called the Defense Meteorological Satellite Program. The POSE orbit the Earth at elevations ranging from 515 to 540 miles, 830 to 870 kilometers. In altitude, with one crossing the equator at 7:30 am and 1:40 pm. Data is then transmitted to stations located at Wallops Island, Virginia, and in Fairbanks, Alaska.
What caused the Bhopal disaster?
In December 1984, the U.S. owned Union Carbide pesticide plant in Bhopal, India, leaked toxic chemicals, methyl isocyanate gas, that killed over 3,800 people. It was the worst industrial accident in history. Union Carbide paid a fine of $470 million to avoid facing criminal charges.
How many people will find themselves in flooded coastal regions should global warming melt the ice caps?
Worldwide, over 150 million people would find themselves underwater. By the year 2070 should scenarios about global warming play out. This includes 130 important port cities, such as New York City, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Mumbai, and Bangkok. A 2007 estimate said that this would have an economic impact of $35 trillion. An amount no nation is currently equipped to surmount. Not only would such a flood destroy coastal cities, but mass migrations would occur, causing political and social unrest that many believe would inevitably lead to military conflicts, famines, and disease.
What is a fulgurite?
When lightning strikes sandy soil, the soil melts into a glassy stone called a fulgurite. These stones can appear branch or root-like, almost as if the bolt of lightning has been fossilized or petrified somehow. The glassy material in the fulgurite is known as lechatelierite, a substance that can also be formed by meteors striking the ground. One of the largest fulgurites ever found is housed at Yale University's Peabody Museum of Natural History and is about 13 feet, 4 meters, in length.
What is the difference between subvortices and satellite tornadoes?
The difference is often hard to distinguish, but satellite tornadoes form independently of other larger tornadoes, while subvortices in multiple vortex tornadoes form within a central tornado.
Has it ever snowed in Arizona?
Higher elevations in the state actually receive quite a bit of snow. Flagstaff, for instance, is situated at an elevation of about 7,000 feet, 2,133 meters, and experiences very cold temperatures in the winter. In January 22, 1937, the temperature dipped to -30 degrees Fahrenheit (-34.4 degrees Celsius). Though the climate of Flagstaff is officially semi-arid, the city receives 100 inches, 254 centimeters, of snow annually. Even in lower elevations, however, snow is not unknown in Arizona. Tucson received an extraordinary 6.4 inches, 16.5 centimeters, of snow on November 16, 1957. This, of course, was not typical for the otherwise very hot city.
What are the types of snowflakes as identified in the International Classification System?
The types of snowflakes have been stellar plates, as the name indicates, are star-like flakes that are flat, distinctly hexagonal, with 6 broad arms. Sectored plates are similar to stellar plates, but also have prominent ridges pointing to each of the 6 facets in the plate. Double plates occur when 2 stellar plates are connected by a cap. Usually, one plate is much larger than the other. Split plates and stars happen when parts of 2 separate plates merge to form one plate that, if not closely inspected, looks like a single 6-armed plate. For example, a partial plate containing 2 arms could merge with one that has 4 arms left, leaving a 6-armed plate that appears like a complete single plate. Simple prisms tiny, 6-armed. Flat snowflakes that are hard to distinguish with the naked eye, but are a very common form. Stellar dendrites have tree-like arms. Dendritic means tree-like, with multiple branches extending from each of the 6 arms. Fern-like stellar dendrites are stellar dendrites with more frilly, fern-like branches. Radiating dendrites, spatial dendrites, are dendrites that have arms extending not just in 2 dimensions, but in 3. Capped columns look like columns that have 6 flat sides. Imagine 2 hexagons that are joined together. Hollow columns are similar to capped columns, except the ends of the columns are hollow or devoted. 12-sided snowflakes when 2 6-sided plates join together at a 30-degree angle. They form what appears to be a 12-armed plate or capped column.
What is the ozone layer?
The ozone layer is part of the stratosphere, a layer of the Earth's atmosphere that lies about 10 to 30 miles. 16 to 48 kilometers, above the surface of the Earth. Ozone, O3, is like regular gaseous oxygen, O2, with an extra oxygen atom attached to it. It is created when short-wavelength ultraviolet radiation interacts with O2 molecules. The energy from the radiation breaks the molecules apart, which then recombine into ozone. The ozone layer is important because it protects life on Earth from harmful ultraviolet radiation. While it does not absorb all of this radiation, otherwise, it would be impossible for you to get a tan. It prevents about 80% of it from reaching life on Earth. As anyone who knows about melanoma can tell you, too much ultraviolet radiation can lead to cancer. Before the ozone layer was discovered, someone must have discovered ozone.
Who introduced use of the millibar to measure air pressure?
English meteorologist William Napier Shaw, 1854 to 1945, was one of the leading scientists in his field, and former director of Britain's Meteorological Office from 1905 to 1920. He suggested that air pressure be measured in millibars in 1909. But it was not adopted as an international standard until 1929.
What do meteorologists mean when they talk about pop?
POP is an abbreviation for probability of precipitation.
How is the troposphere defined?
The troposphere is considered as the layer closest to Earth and is also the region where temperatures reliably decrease with altitude. The troposphere is thickest at the Earth's equator, reaching heights of about 11 miles. 17 to 18 kilometers, and this is, therefore, also where you will find the coldest tropospheric temperatures. It might seem rather ironic that, right above the world's steamiest tropical forests, temperatures can be as low as -110 degrees Fahrenheit, -79 degrees Celsius.